Chapter 1436, Seconds. Babo was besieged by Gao Changkong and Lancelot, and at this time, he simply could not spare the energy to block the attacks launched at him by Zhang Yi and Flower. A fierce look flashed in his eyes. At the moment when the attack was about to reach his body, the ability of space replacement was immediately activated. And the one who replaced his position was none other than Lancelot. However, after being displaced, there was no trace of surprise in Lancelot's eyes. It was as if he had been prepared for this, and his body quickly avoided to the side. Zhang Yi and Flower's attacks missed, but a smile rose to the corner of his mouth. Just as the plan said, he will have to use his ability to avoid our combined attack. But in doing so, at least he will have a 5-second cooldown on his ability. Zhang Yi had already discussed this with Gao Changkong and Lancelot in advance. Babo Lu has the ability to control time, but so does Zhang Yi. 2 seconds ago, Zhang Yi had predicted all of Babo Lu's movements. Between two mutants of the same attribute, it is a matter of who has a stronger ability and who can control it better. Babo Lu's advantage over the others was not as obvious with Zhang Yi. Click! Zhang Yi skillfully changed the bullet, then quickly turned the muzzle of the gun to relock on Babo's position. Flower also opened her mouth wide, with colorful light flashing in her mouth, preparing a more powerful high-energy particle beam. This time, Babo could no longer use his ability to space displacement to avoid it. Gao Changkong and Lancelot charged at him with giant swords in their hands, attacking him thousands of times a second like crazy. He was unable to spare any energy to deal with Zhang Yi and Flower's attacks. Boom! Zhang Yi and Flower's attacks directly hit Babo's torso. Even though he tried his best to avoid them, in the face of a hunter of Zhang Yi's level, unless he was fully focused, there was no way he could avoid the bullets shot from Zhang Yi's gun. Babo's heavy body was sent flying, and the dark silver heavy armor on his body cracked open with a click. He struggled to stabilize his form, and a dark depression suddenly appeared on his chest. The heavy armor had almost been pierced, and spiderweb-like cracks spread along the gap. He only needed to withstand a second attack, and his armor would immediately shatter. It's working, keep going. Gao Changkong and Lancelot's eyes flashed with joy as they excitedly spoke, before they attacked Babo once again with their giant swords in hand. The two Epsilons, who were close to the Black Chariot level, teamed up and launched a fierce attack that left almost no weak points. The ferocious sword pressure almost emptied the air in the temple, leaving it in a near vacuum. But Babo looked up, with only a slit of his helmet showing, his eyes showing no fear. The ability to displace space activated again. The third attack was evaded by him. In the 5 seconds of time, Zhang Yi and the other two people and the cat could only activate their combined attack twice. After all, if they wanted to snipe from a distance of 5 kilometers, kill General Babo, and still need to pierce his armor, for Zhang Yi and Flower, they had to accumulate energy, not instantaneously fire. It doesn't matter. Even if our tactic is only successful once every 5 seconds, a few more times will still cause enough damage. The problem is, what level of attack is required to kill Babo at this level? Defeating a Black Chariot class mutant might be possible. But killing it is going to be very difficult. The higher the level of a mutant with supernatural powers, the more difficult it is to kill them. But for now, this is indeed the best way, and the only means that can achieve results. So the four of them continued to execute the strategy. When Babo's armor was hit again, it shattered with a click sound, and the left half of his chest armor was shattered and fell to the ground in a crumbling sound. Babo's gaze looked into the distance beyond the temple, and his battle axe was brandished desperately in his hands, fighting against Gao Changkong and Lancelot. He was like a giant, challenging two worms. In terms of body size, he was terrifying enough. If it weren't for the appearance of the mutant, it would be hard to imagine that a human could defeat such a creature. Even the ancient beasts could hardly stand a chance against it. Zhang Yi pulled the trigger to reload, and a power from the void spread like a dark tide from the dark vortex behind him, before flowing through his arm and into Thunderstrike. "Go on," he said coldly. In the 20th second, Zhang Yi's bullet struck Babu's body again, this time piercing it front to back. Pop! The holy silver bullet, streaked with blood, pierced the sky, then hit the wall and fell to the ground with a clang. Gao Changkong and Lancelot's eyes lit up. It worked! This was the first time since the start of the war that they had seriously injured Babu. "Don't get excited. Don't forget that he can turn back time," Zhang Yi calmly reminded them. Gao Changkong said, "I haven't forgotten, but the fact is that he can only use his ability to turn back time once a minute. When the next time he uses his ability, there is a high probability that we can kill him." Babu's body was swaying unsteadily. Zhang Yi's shot had also had a significant impact on his body, and coupled with the combined attack of the flowers, it almost sent him crashing to the ground. However, he quickly stabilized his form and looked down at his chest. The bullet had left a fist-sized hole, but it was the size of a human fist, not his. So for him, it wasn't a fatal injury. He had avoided the heart in the previous blow, and since the bullet had not remained in his body, the injury was acceptable. He raised the battle-axe in his hand and once again looked at Gao Changkong and Lancelot with a defiant gaze, even faintly looking beyond the temple to the sniper in the distance. "This guy is much more difficult than I thought." Zhang Yi frowned. In his imagination, that shot should have been enough to force him to use his ability and turn back time. After all, the bullet's tip carried a virulent poison, and even 0.1 milligrams of it could kill an adult elephant. However, this guy's physical strength exceeded Zhang Yi's imagination. Judging from Babu's appearance, it was obvious that the injury was not serious enough. Babu also understood that his time rewind was an extremely powerful ability, but at the same time, the interval between uses was when he was most at risk. So he would not use this ability lightly, unless it was truly unavoidable. "It's okay, there are 40 seconds left. I really don't believe that you can withstand the continuous onslaught of our 4 epsilons for 1 minute without dying." Zhang Yi did not hesitate and pulled the trigger again. The holy silver bullet, a symbol of death, whistled towards his chest, wrapped in the power of the void. Chapter 1437, Time Rewind. At the 30th second, Babu could no longer remain calm. His body had already been severely injured, and at this point, even if Zhang Yi did not intervene, the combined power of Gao Changkong and Lancelot was already more than he could handle. Without hesitation, he decisively activated the ability Time Rewind. The next moment, his body returned to its perfect state from 1 minute ago. Even the broken armor on his body was reshaped, as if what had just happened had never happened. "Continue. The next 60 seconds belong to us," Zhang Yi calmly said to Gao Changkong and Lancelot. "Okay, let's finish him." The several people were full of enthusiasm, and all thought that the next battle had completely taken General Babu in hand. But no one expected that the next battle would be much more difficult than the previous one. Facing the two men's joint fast attack, General Babu was initially a bit tired of parrying, but now he could handle it with ease. His huge battle axe was not at all dull. With one person and one axe, he was able to counterattack while fending off the attacks of the two. Even Zhang Yi and Flower's ranged attacks were blocked by his battle axe in time this time. Boom! The terrifying power exploded on his battle axe. Although it sent him flying hundreds of meters, General Babu still stood firmly on the ground. His armor was not shattered, except for the silver bullet embedded deeply in the battle axe. "This guy." Zhang Yi saw General Babu's face become grave. "It seems he has adapted to our style of attack. The Three-Eyed Clan is a race with a backward civilization. However, when it comes to military might, they have developed to the extreme that they can achieve. Almost every male is trained in martial arts from birth. And only the best among them can become the kingdom's generals. Babu, before becoming an ability user, he was first and foremost a top martial artist who practiced martial arts day in and day out for decades. Gao Changkong, Lancelot, and even Zhang Yi are all younger brothers when it comes to combat. At first, the four-person joint attack really made him uncomfortable, but he could slowly get used to the swordsmanship of Gao Changkong and Lancelot. In Babo's eyes, the swordsmanship of these two men cannot be said to be difficult to watch, but it is indeed full of flaws. With the pressure on him reduced, it was easier to defend against the ranged attacks that clearly followed a trajectory from the entrance of the temple towards him. Interesting, worthy of being the guardian of the Holy Spirit Temple. Zhang Yi's eyes lit up with a murderous intent, and the deep-seated desire to win excited him. But he had no choice but to make changes. Even if Babo began to adapt to their attack methods, even if he knew what would happen, he might not be able to change it. After all, they were four people working together. The attack continued, and Babo's pressure decreased a lot, but his strength was not enough for him to take the upper hand. After 40 seconds, his defense was broken again. However, this time, his tactics changed. Instead of just taking the attacks of the four of them, he began to choose a defensive style of play. A huge battle axe was like a huge shield. And to Zhang Yi and the other three, it was practically a door. And when facing Zhang Yi's attacks, as long as they didn't hurt his vitals, he didn't even mind taking some damage. Bullets were still too small for his body to be fatal. He held out for 60 seconds. His body was riddled with holes and his weapons were chipped, but as soon as the time was up, as soon as his time rewind ability was activated, all the negative problems on his body were eliminated. This guy is really hard to kill. Lancelot gritted his teeth and said, "This guy is really hard to kill. The four of us teamed up, and we still couldn't take him down?" Gao Changkong took a deep breath. The three-eyed clan's physical strength is inherently far superior to ours as humans, and coupled with his perverted abilities, it's indeed tricky. At this time, Zhang Yi spoke up. "It's okay, let's try again." "You have a way?" "Well, there is a method we can try." This time, Zhang Yi closed the distance and chose a position 2,000 meters outside the temple to fire. He basically judged that General Babo's ability could not reach here. At the same time, he called Yang Xinxin out of shadow space. Upon seeing Yang Xinxin, everyone immediately understood Zhang Yi's plan. When faced with a bug, you must use a bug to deal with it. Once the abilities of the rules category kick in, they are the best way to restrain those troublesome mutants. Let's help you create an opportunity. Without hesitation, the two of them rushed over and continued to attack Babo. Zhang Yi said to Yang Xinxin, "Every time Hua Hua and I attack, he will choose to block our attacks with the battle axe, but at this time, in order to stabilize his body, he will not move. So your attack has to come from behind us." Yang Xinxin nodded. "I understand." Once again, Zhang Yi and Flower's attacks shot towards Babo Lu, who had reached a state of near-perfect defense by now. Gao Changkong and Lancelot's swords could no longer touch the armor on his body. So when Zhang Yi and Flower's familiar attacks came, he easily raised the battle axe in his hands to block in front of him. But just after their attacks were launched, Yang Xinxin's Cupid's arrow followed suit, shooting towards Babo Lu. The battle axe blocked Zhang Yi's bullets and Flower's high-energy particle beams, but it was pierced by a red arrow. The arrow pierced his heavy armor and went straight into his heart. Babo froze for a moment, and then an indescribable feeling welled up in the depths of his heart. "Put down your weapon and don't resist." Yang Xinxin's voice came through the long palace and into Babo's ears. His eyes were a little obsessed, but a trace of struggle appeared in the midst of his confusion. Time. Rewind. The next moment, Yang Xinxin felt the connection between her and Babo break. She frowned. "Brother, my ability has failed." Zhang Yi let out a light laugh, but his eyes became increasingly fierce. "Sure enough, after time rewind, everything will be reset. Even the abilities in the rules category will be erased. There is nothing that can be done about this." Yang Xinxin's arrows can change the other party's perception, so that they willingly obey her orders. However, they cannot change the other party's memories or abilities. As soon as Babo realized that he was being controlled, he used his ability Time Rewind, for the first time to counteract Yang Xinxin's control. Chapter 1438, Time and Space versus Time and Space. Seeing that even the rules category ability of the bug was unable to defeat Babo, Gao Changkong and Lancelot began to feel a little impatient. Although they did not know what was going on at the moment among the higher-ups of the Holy Spirit Temple, they could sense the strange atmosphere here. Every second wasted here could potentially bring them huge losses. This guy, why is he so hard to kill? I can't believe he's still going strong with full power. Lancelot's words got stuck in his throat halfway through. He was going to say, I can't believe he can keep going like this. However, judging from the opponent's abilities, as long as he couldn't kill the opponent within a minute, he could maintain his peak state forever. And the three of them simply couldn't do it. Zhang Yi slowly stood up and put away the huge sniper rifle. He knew that there was no point in continuing to fight like this. The longer the battle went on, the more difficult it would be for them to kill General Babo. If they were still thinking about conserving their strength, they would never be able to defeat the enemy. I didn't really like playing like this in the first place. Zhang Yi let out a sigh, then looked at Flower at his feet and said, but now, we have to consider going up close and personal with him. Flower responded with a meow. Then he spread his huge wings and quickly rushed into the temple. Gao Changkong and Lancelot watched Zhang Yi and Flower join the battle and knew that Zhang Yi had given up his long-range attacks and planned to fight up close. However, Zhang Yi's melee combat strength didn't seem outstanding. Zhang Yi didn't say much, and the sword in the tree in his right hand quickly spread a large number of vines, spreading directly along the walls and floor of the palace. He walked forward step by step, and a dark light began to rapidly distort in his left eye. Time Swamp. As soon as he finished speaking, a twisting force instantly erupted from his body, enveloping the entire palace. Babu's eyebrows furrowed. When this force hit, he didn't feel any discomfort in his body. But the next moment, two fierce sword winds suddenly struck his neck and lower back. Babu's pupils shrank, and the coldness of the sword's edge made his hair stand on end. The ability of the Time Swamp is to slow down time for everything in a specific area, with Zhang Yi himself at the center. While in the Time Swamp, Zhang Yi can decide who will be affected and who will not. Those affected will not feel any difference, and in their perception, the flow of time will be normal. However, in the eyes of Zhang Yi and those not under his control, the speed of everything else is slowed by 30%. On paper, this is not a very dramatic slowdown. But remember, this slowdown is calculated on a proportional basis. So at this moment, for Babo, the speed of everyone he faces has increased tremendously. So Gao Changkong and Lancelot's attacks have become even faster and more ruthless. Zhang Yi and Flower also joined the battle. At this point, Zhang Yi no longer had any other concerns, because he had thoroughly figured out the opponent's abilities. I will warn you before he activates his ability. The person who is warned only needs to stop in time. The only way Babo could counterattack now was to perform a space displacement on them, so that they would attack each other. But Zhang Yi could predict his actions 2 seconds in advance and warn the others. This move made Babu's ability ineffective. As expected, Babo was fighting 4 opponents at once, and with the influence of the Time Swamp, he quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. The heavy armor on his body was slashed by various weapons, leaving terrifying wounds. He decisively activated his ability and exchanged positions with Zhang Yi when Gao Changkong lunged at him with a sword. However, Gao Changkong and Zhang Yi had long been prepared for this. The moment Zhang Yi appeared in Babu's position, the two of them simultaneously changed the direction of their attacks and aimed their weapons at Babo. The golden sacred sword and the sword in the tree struck Babu's body at the same time. His sudden attack backfired on him. he was unable to dodge in time and was instead blasted away. Go, strangle him. Zhang Yi controlled the sword in the tree and spread endless green vines that surrounded Babo from all directions. A thick vine wrapped around his body. Babo struggled to swing his battle axe, and a powerful force exploded from his body, shattering the vines. But the next moment, the combined attack of the four came again. Time rewind. Babo had to use his time ability again, because with just one battle axe, he simply couldn't block the attacks of the four. His body was covered in bruises and was bleeding profusely. In an instant, he had recovered as before. This time, can you last for 60 seconds? Zhang Yi said coldly. The four powerful forces had already surrounded Babo in the center, with Gao Changkong and Lancelot as the main attackers. Zhang Yi was mainly using the sword in the tree to hypnosis Babo, having already used his ability to predict his movements, while Hua Hua was supporting the attack. This time, Babo's ability was completely exposed, as if he was naked in front of the others. His ability was cracked, and he could no longer fight with ease and comfort. Instead, he found himself fighting with increasing difficulty. He should have been proud that he was able to hold his own against four epsilons at the same time for so long. But the cold reality was staring him in the face. Even the first general of the Nash Kingdom, with his incredible ability, could not reverse his certain fate. The cold weapons in the hands of the three men and the minions of Flower mercilessly tore at his body, making it difficult for him to defend himself with his fists against 6 hands and 4 claws. 52 seconds after using time rewind for the last time, he was killed by the 4 of them at the entrance to the Holy Spirit Temple. The sword cut through his armor, revealing the unimpressive body of a member of the Three-Eyed Clan. This body was covered in thousands of wounds, and blood was flowing down his thick legs like a spring. He did not fall, but the battle axe in his hand fell heavily to the ground, and his eyes lost their focus. Although they had killed their enemy, Zhang Yi and the others did not feel any relief. It had been so difficult to kill him. They had left more than 100 terrifying wounds on his vital areas before they finally finished off Babo. If they had given him a few more seconds to recover to full strength, no one knew how the outcome would have been. However, looking at the corpse of this Black Chariot-level mutant, Lancelot's eyes were filled with excitement. If the origin of this Black Chariot-level alien can be absorbed, it will be a huge boost to their strength. Together with the origin of the kingdom's Grand General absorbed earlier, once they have completely absorbed this power, they will all reach the level of Black Chariot without any accidents. However, there is only one copy of the origin, but there are 3 powers present. How should it be divided? Chapter 1439, Plan Before You Act. General Babo, the keeper of the Holy Spirit Temple's doors, was finally killed. Although the process was a bit difficult, it was a success after all, and no one could stop their progress anymore. However, once they had lost their common enemy, their competition with each other became apparent. General Babo's origin was the origin of a Black Chariot-level mutant, and everyone wanted it. The 3 of them looked at each other, and even the flower had its alien pupils wide open, squinting as it sized up the other 2. It seems that now is not the time for us to fight, Zhang Yi said indifferently. But whose origin is his? Lancelot's face showed a smile that did not reach his eyes. Gao Changkong smiled and said, unfortunately, the origins of mutants are indivisible, or this problem would be easy to solve. Zhang Yi said, that's not necessarily the case. Upon hearing this, Lancelot and Gao Changkong looked at Zhang Yi with surprise. Zhang Yi said, the origin of mutants is essentially a special type of energy body, so there is certainly a way to store and divide it. There is a mutant by my side who has developed this technology. Zhang Yi was naturally referring to Liu Karen's energy storage technology. This method was originally developed to contain the power of the spirit of sacrifice. Can you guarantee an even division into 3? Gao Changkong asked. At this, Lancelot raised his right hand. I can supervise that for you. Since it's an energy body, we just need to monitor the energy response level. We have the technology for that in Britannia. Zhang Yi glanced at him and thought to himself, what are you pretending in front of me? Even if we don't need that kind of technology, our instinctive judgment of the origin will not be too far off. And, you're wrong about something else. Zhang Yi looked at Gao Changkong and smiled, reaching out to pet Flower's head. I have 2 servings here. So I need to divide it into 4 servings. Gao Changkong and Lancelot looked at Zhang Yi with some envy. Epsilon is now the world's top combat power, and there are probably less than 50 strong humans in this area. But Zhang Yi, he actually has a battle beast of this level. It really is enviable. After some bargaining, since Flower's supernatural ability index was only 13,000 points, she contributed less. So the final distribution plan was that Zhang Yi took 40% of the share alone, and the other 2 each took 30%. Lu Karen was called out by Zhang Yi and was responsible for collecting and distributing the origin. Seeing a capable young woman with short hair running out of Zhang Yi's shadow, Gao Changkong and Lancelot felt a little sour again. Space ability users are really convenient. Who knew that they had to carry a lot of supplies with them when they came all the way here? Food, medicine, weapons, these things can only be carried on their own backs. In order to maximize space saving, the food they eat is all compressed, which can only provide energy and basically has no taste. Moreover, they also had to consider the safety of their subordinates, as they needed to bring them along. And then there was Zhang Yi. He could stuff his entire house into the space and never have to worry about saving space. When in danger, he could just throw everyone into the space and be done with it. The 2 of them felt even worse as they thought about it. Soon, Lu Karen finished collecting and dividing the origin. The 3 portions of origin were placed in special translucent jars. Zhang Yi threw the jar into dimensional space, and then his gaze turned to the closed doors ahead. Entering here was the true path to the upper source core area of the Holy Spirit Temple. Let's go! We've been underground for so long, it's about time we went and found out what kind of existence is in this Nash Kingdom's Holy Spirit Temple. Zhang Yi's tone was very serious. The mysterious pyramid underground in the Qinling Mountains came to mind, and compared to this Holy Spirit Temple that seemed to reach up to the sky, he already had some guesses. Behind the group, the members of the Knights of the Round Table and Gu Man slowly walked over. Looking at the huge temple doors, their eyes were filled with both nervousness and anticipation. I always feel that there is something very dangerous behind the doors. Lan Malik, the Shining Knight, said. Zhang Yi teased, if you're scared, it's not too late to leave now. Lan Malik's face tightened, and he said angrily, we've already reached the final level. If we don't fight the boss, it would be the player's biggest regret. So what are we waiting for, let's go. Lancelot said, carrying his knightly 2-handed sword, and took the lead towards the doors. Zhang Yi and Gao Changkong didn't want to lag behind, and walked towards the doors step by step. In Zhang Yi's mind, he repeated the result of his calculations for the nth time. Since entering the depths of the demon abyss, I have measured the strength of the Nash Kingdom. The comparative reference is the mysterious snake people tribe under the Qinling Mountains. In the Misty Valley Abyss, I have only met the Hades Gatekeeper, but not his tribe, so I cannot make a clear comparison. When I encountered the Purple Pyramid, the guardians that appeared were all captain-level humanoid spiders. The white dragon that appeared later gave me the feeling that it was at least a bishop-level mutant with over 30,000 points. But now that my strength is close to 20,000 points, I realize that his strength is definitely more than that. It has to be at least 40,000 points or more, or even higher, to reach a strength that makes me completely unable to think of resistance. Although the Three-Eyed Clan is powerful, an average Three-Eyed Clan soldier has the strength of an average member of the investigation team, but compared to the human face spider, the gap is too great. Including the Epsilon-class mutants we encountered in Nash Kingdom, their strength is still at the chariot level. In any force, the strength of the strong will be distributed in the form of a pyramid, with each level progressing from the previous one. It is difficult for a strong person to appear at the top of the pyramid, because it does not make logical sense. Therefore, the most powerful mutant in the Nash Kingdom is probably around 25,000 points. Considering a material similar to the Spirit of Sacrifice, it can only reach a level of around 30,000 points at most. And at this level, just a few of us alone are already unable to overcome it. But so what? A strange arc appeared at the corner of Zhang Yi's mouth. With these guys as cannon fodder, my abilities are enough to support me in escaping this area. If things go well, and Luozhua succeeds in obtaining the power of the Tantric faith, perhaps I can get even more. The Tantric faith has been planning for 1,000 years, so it's impossible that it won't be completely prepared. So, the worst that can happen is that they all die here today, and I escape alive. I don't mind using them as a scapegoat. They can't run as fast as I can anyway. Zhang Yi casually surveyed the surroundings. The members of the Knights of the Round Table and the pitiful duo of Gao Changkong were all already in his calculations. Chapter 1440, The New King. The crowd pushed open the heavy doors. When the doors opened, what appeared behind them was not the magnificent sight of a palace, but pitch black. In the sight of the abyss, there was only a long, narrow white staircase that spiraled upwards towards the sky. The depths were bottomless, and the heights were unclear as to where they led. However, the group had come this far with great difficulty, so naturally they would not retreat. The three groups maintained a certain distance from one another, and then set foot on the white staircase, quickly moving upwards. Rumble! The Holy Spirit Temple shook again, as if some kind of terrifying ancient creature was awakening, and the steps beneath their feet shook. But the group paid no heed, and continued forward with determination. Soon, they finally reached the end, where the steps ended at a huge white platform. Zhang Yi and the others looked up. At the other end of the white platform were two bronze doors carved with ferocious beasts. A figure in red appeared before their eyes. Zhang Yi remembered this figure. On the day of the prince's wedding, he had glanced up from a distance. That huge, tall figure, dressed in a magnificent scarlet wedding gown, was now holding a strangely shaped weapon in front of the crowd. Behind her were hundreds of warriors dressed in dark silver battle armor. Just one glance at these people was enough to know that they were the absolute elite of the kingdom of Nash, because there was nothing else in their eyes but cold and merciless murderous intent. The princess coldly scanned the crowd that had arrived here, and already had a bad feeling in her heart. She never imagined that these hairless mice, whom they treated like domestic animals, could actually make it to the highest level of the Holy Spirit Temple. This also meant that the guardians below, the kingdom's 5 generals, had all been defeated. She raised the sharp blade in her hand and pointed it at Zhang Yi and the others, her tone cold as she said, "No matter what kind of existence you guys are, today, I absolutely will not allow you to take a single step forward." At the same time, the 300 elite warriors behind her smashed their weapons onto the ground, making a deafening impact and creating a terrifying commotion. A murderous intent soared up to the sky in an instant. If anyone wants to get past here today, they must first step over their corpses. "Sorry, we don't have time to waste here," Zhang Yi said coldly. He took a step forward and swung the sword in the tree in his hand. A huge crescent-shaped blade of light suddenly burst forth from the tip of the sword, and the surging power of the void engulfed the area in front of it, like a huge monster of the sky. In the blink of an eye, the huge white platform was completely swallowed up by the power of the void. When the dark power slowly retreated like a tide, the white platform became quiet. The figures of Princess Amlet and the 300 elite soldiers of the Nash Kingdom no longer existed, not even as dust. "The idea is good, but it's just too weak," Zhang Yi said indifferently. Lancelot looked up at the huge bronze doors. They were completely different from the doors to the other rooms in the Holy Spirit Temple. They were a dark green color, and were carved with hideous monsters they had never heard of before. For some reason, they gave off a similar feeling to the Door of Eternal Severance. It was full of deathly air, and just one look made one's spine tingle, as if countless souls of the dead were trapped within the bronze doors. "Break the doors," said Lancelot. The four Epsilons looked at one another, and without any hesitation, they all let out their full strength and slammed into the bronze doors. The four forces converged in one place, and the terrifying power caused the entire palace to tremble violently once again. Rumble. As their output power increased, the bronze doors could not withstand such a powerful force and began to crack inch by inch. Behind the bronze doors, within the huge red energy crystal, a pair of amber vertical pupils suddenly opened. After rolling around a bit, they immediately exploded with murderous intent. Boom! A red energy burst out from his body, and the red crystal around his body also shattered in an instant. The red energy storm rushed towards the sky like a storm. The dome made of barrier stones actually began to crack under the continuous impact of the red storm, and finally it completely shattered with a crack sound. The entire palace shook even more violently, and even the white steps behind Zhang Yi and the others began to fall apart. Clattering. It seemed that it could not withstand such powerful energy. The walls of the Holy Spirit Temple, which had existed for eons, began to peel off in large patches, just like an old house that had been exposed to moisture. Ka-chap! A clear cracking sound entered everyone's ears. They felt the murderous intent and the terrifying pressure that was enough to make their faces pale. Zhang Yi and the others finally opened the bronze doors and then cautiously took hold of their weapons and walked in. All that remained in front of them was a huge altar and broken red energy crystal fragments. The breath of the spirit of sacrifice. Zhang Yi looked at the fragments and could still feel the residual energy. According to his estimation, this spirit of sacrifice was many times larger than the one he had absorbed in the past. Just then, a beam of light shot down from above and landed on everyone's heads. Looking up, he realized that the dome of the Holy Spirit Temple had been opened up at some point. And at the edge of the broken dome sat a member of the Three-Eyed Clan with cold eyes. He was only about 5 meters tall, which was considered relatively short among the Three-Eyed Clan. His body was well proportioned, without an ounce of excess fat, almost like a bodybuilding champion, but his muscles were not exaggerated in any way. It was hard to imagine a creature having such a physique if it hadn't been tempered over the years. He was sitting atop a high dome, one arm casually resting on his bent leg, staring coldly at the crowd below. He is the new king of the Nash Kingdom. Zhang Yi's eyes were fixed on him as he said to the others around him in a deep voice. Everyone felt like they were facing a formidable enemy. They could sense an incredibly terrifying power emanating from this man. Although he didn't make any movements, the kind of energy contained within his body was like a human-shaped explosives depot, ready to explode at any moment. Prince Amlet did not continue to look at Zhang Yi and the others, but instead fixed his gaze on the Nash Kingdom below. At this time, the Nash Kingdom was in ruins. The city built on the spiral of the abyss had been destroyed by almost a third. The flames lit by humans were still burning fiercely, with smoke billowing in all directions. Even from a distance, the sounds of wailing could be heard here. Watching his kingdom being destroyed like this, Prince Amlet's face showed no expression, and there was not even the slightest fluctuation of emotion in his eyes. After he had absorbed the power of the spirit of sacrifice, he felt that his life force had been completely sublimated. At the moment, he was as powerful as a god, a being transcending the other. The death of ordinary people, even the death of his own queen and his top general, could not conceal his own joy. So, this is the level of life that my ancestors once reached? His shoulders suddenly began to shake violently, and the corners of his mouth pulled back almost to the roots of his ears, revealing an incredibly strange smile. It really is wonderful.